Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin can and string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, including blogs such as Cold Omaha and Cover 32. Please welcome useful human Arif Hassan. Arif, how you doing this Sunday evening?
I'm good. It's Sunday. How are you?
It is Sunday. It's a Sunday without football, which makes me sad. Which makes everybody sad. But I think I'm more sad about the death of my can opener than anything else.
The death of your can? Well, that sounds like a story.
Well, so as anyone who's met me can attest, I am a ogre of a human being. And I have these gigantic hands, and I'm also left-handed. And for whatever reason, I cannot keep a can opener for more than like a year without destroying it.
Jesus.
Like,
okay.
It's like especially the plastic ones that, because people have bought me can openers, like, oh, here, whatever. And like, I always just break it in two somehow. Like cans, and I'm almost at the point of getting an electric can opener, but I was
oddly specific curse.
I know, right? Like, why this? Why is this the thing that's gonna curse me and not my back or my credit? Oh no, both of those things are gonna curse me too. But the can opener thing especially seems to be a big problem, and I'm like oddly specific about my can opener situation. Like I keep it with my cans instead of with the rest of the stuff. Because I used to date a girl who would leave the can opener everywhere in the apartment. Like it'd be on the coffee table in the like living room, and I'd be looking for it and I couldn't find it, and I'd get real annoyed because she would just like hide it places in the apartment. So any girl who's dated me for the past 10 years has noticed that my can opener positioning is very specific, and it's always very easy to find. But now I have no can opener. My can opener is
I'm definitely Googling electric can openers because this is already ridiculous.
And we need to make sure it's a left-handed one, or something that will be friendly to left-handed people, because I actually had a left-handed can opener at one point, but I think I lost it in the divorce. So, like,
Christ.
Of all, my life is a sad, sad story of just broken can openers from here to Bloomington. It's just a damn
like
shame.
$20 to $35.
I know, and every year I go through one. Like I forgot to take a picture of the one that I destroyed today. Like it's just sad. I just bought it too. It's maybe I'm at this point. Am I the problem?
Clearly.
If I'm the only common denominator in all of these can openers.
Let's see. Best design from thespruce.com. Cuisinart Deluxe Electric Can Opener. $63. You're paying a premium, I think, for the design. One of the sleeker designs on the market right now. This gorgeous brushed stainless steel can opener from Cuisinart cuts with precision and features an extra wide, heavy bottom base that helps to keep it from sliding or tipping while in use. For extra protection, it also has the rubber feet, so no slipping will happen either. They just kind of said that. The blade and magnetic lid holder are removable, which makes cleaning more easy. Customers love that the product is entirely made of solid metal with no plastic parts to it, and it seems to be relatively quiet while in use. They also say that it opens the can smoothly, and heavy cans don't seem to be a problem for the device to hold. One reviewer reported the product giving out after a couple of years of limited use, but otherwise customers have been mostly happy with the can opener.
I need one of those like buy it for life situations where like it's some like Williams-Sonoma thing.
Well, Black & Decker has one that I think is a lifetime guarantee, and that's only $28.
I could just burn through those for the next, however long I'm going to be alive, 5-10 years, it'll be fine.
Yeah, right. Just abuse the hell out of the warranties, and
I'm using it to try to like get the lug nuts off of my tire. Why won't you open? Why is this not a thing?
Oh my god, the best overall is a combination can opener and knife sharpener. Oh my god.
That's a thing. Are you sure you're not looking at the Williams-Sonoma calendar or catalog at this point?
I accidentally added over to Sharper Image.
I need one that's also like part iPad. Like the kid's gonna need to learn his letters on this.
You can listen to ebooks. No,
the wheels on the can go, and then it opens.
This heavyweight can opener from Hamilton Beach is a top seller in its category because of its durability and overall performance. It's only $20, James. I think this is the one you want.
I might need to get a link to that and or put it in the show notes so I can get that later on. I've reached a point. I'm starting to wonder if canned food is for me. So welcome to this week's show. We've got plenty of actual news to talk about outside of the can opener information. We have hired an offensive coordinator. We have retained our quarterbacks coach. And also in very important news, Frank Reich is the coach of the Indianapolis Colts. We will check in on this story as the show progresses. But first, before we go on, we want to thank you guys so much for listening, for helping out with the show over the years. Definitely appreciate it. We will be moving toward our off-season model, which was going to be a few less shows than normal, but we are waiting for content. So we appreciate anything you guys are willing to throw away in the way of donations, in the way of helping out on social media, sending out tweets about the show. Again, really appreciate it. We do have a donation in from Gianluca Octusa, and if that's not the way you pronounce it, you should provide a pronunciation guide because I am just going to assume that's how it's going to be spelled, or pronounced anyway. Via the PayPal, and says, thanks for doing such a great job, guys. Thank you so much, Gianluca Octusa. Sure, or Artusa. Either way, works for us. If you would like to donate to the show, you can do so in one of two different ways. You can go to paypal.me/Norse Code, or you can go to patreon.com/Norse Code, and you can donate there. So, again, really appreciate it. We are ad-free and ad-free for a reason. We like to be supported by you guys, and you guys did so much for us over the off-season and the regular season last year. So, again, thank you. Moving on, we have plenty of Vikings news to discuss, including the offensive coordinator. We have a pronunciation guide as the show title, just because that was posted in the Star Tribune, just so we're all accustomed to saying dee-fah-LIP-oh. Dee-fah-LIP-oh. Jesus Christ. John.
The John part, that one's tough, though.
Yeah, the John part is the thing that'll catch you. But dee-fah-LIP-oh, what do we know about offensive coordinator John dee-fah-LIP-oh and what he brings to the Minnesota Vikings?
So I've been doing a ton of research. I should have a story hopefully published Monday about him as an offensive coordinator, and I'll break down some of his favorite things in the training camp guide that I put out every year as well. But I talked to a lot of people. I talked to people affiliated with the Raiders, the Browns, the Eagles about John dee-fah-LIP-oh, and they all had super positive things to say. But the kind of the most important thing that they came away with was the nature of the scheme is a lot less important to his overall success than it is his ability as a teacher. I talked to somebody who's gone to a couple of coaching clinics back when he was with the Oakland Raiders, and one of the things that kind of stuck out is his ability to convey information and teach really, really well. I don't know if people are familiar with a lot of these coaching clinics, but it's a bunch of presentations from a bunch of coaches, and a lot of the presentations can be super informative, but can also be pretty dry and difficult to pick up on, just because the coaches are talking about something that they kind of understand fairly intuitively, but sometimes when you understand it, it's even harder to explain. But he does a really, really good job of explaining his concepts and what he talks about really well. He's supposed to be this really good teacher. And one of the things that kind of stuck out to me when I was looking at some of the pressers that he did in Oakland was that he's very well aware of the fact that different people learn in different ways, which that's kind of basic, but at the same time, a lot of coaches don't incorporate that into the way that they coach, the way that they teach. And to him, he was very deliberate and conscientious about the fact that different players will learn the same concepts in different ways, and that he needs to adapt to the learning strategies of the players in order to get the most out of them. And so his commitment to teach, these processes really well, I think is going to be, if he's successful in Minnesota, going to be the reason that he is successful, because he has the ability to communicate those concepts well. As for the scheme stuff, one of the reasons it's less important is because of how adaptive he is to the players around him. We say that basically about every coach all the time, that he's going to adapt the scheme to the players, not the players to the scheme. But it doesn't actually happen all that often in the NFL. Norv Turner, it's a really good example of a guy who, had kind of a strict understanding of what the offense needed to do, and then tried to keep on fitting, square pegs into round holes in order to get that done. There's not a ton of adaptiveness from a lot of coaches to try and cobble together an offensive strategy that really takes advantage of the player's strengths and minimizes the player's weaknesses. It's one of the reasons Pat Shurmur was so good with Minnesota, was his ability to kind of adapt and evolve and change things. That's what dee-fah-LIP-oh is actually really well known for in Oakland, in Cleveland as an offensive coordinator, and again in Philadelphia as a quarterbacks coach. One of the things that's really interesting is that he in Philadelphia was the red zone coordinator in effect. And so he designed and called a lot of the red zone plays when they finally got near the end zone. That's important because the Eagles were second in touchdown scoring percentage in the red zone out of all teams. And, for him to be the red zone coordinator when that happens, it's pretty positive. And he talked about how he changed his approach when he had Nick Foles in versus Carson Wentz, and how he had Foles come up and, explain to him, kind of what concepts he's comfortable with, what concepts he's not. And to him, it's really important to have that kind of back and forth dialogue. He did the same thing with Carson Wentz. In fact, he helped Carson Wentz implement one of the plays that was one of Wentz's favorite at NDSU. And I think they scored on that play in the red zone like 7 times this year. And it's just a play that he liked a lot at NDSU. That wasn't in the Eagles playbook. They put it in there and they installed it. And he was very open and flexible to that idea. And that's, really refreshing just after, a couple of years in Norv Turner. And the coach player sort of dialogue between the two, where there's a lot of give and take, I think is really important. I think that when you go back to, back when the Vikings were coached, so as a defensive example, when the Vikings were coached by Leslie Frazier as the head coach, and I think the 1 year Fred Pugic was the defensive coordinator before he got demoted to linebackers coach, and they had to figure out what he was going to do when Singletary was also a linebackers coach. When the year that Fred Pugic, I think, was the defensive coordinator, there was a lot of problems because, previously when Frazier was the defensive coordinator, he would listen to Kevin Williams and Jared Allen about what they should do defensively and which concepts that they were willing to implement that they were comfortable with and they thought would work against the kind of stuff that they were seeing. And Pugic didn't do that at all. His office door was closed. And we know, of course, that the defense dropped off from the time that Frazier was the defense coordinator, from the time that Pugic was the defensive coordinator. That could be one of probably several reasons why that would be the case. So that's a big part of what dee-fah-LIP-oh does, is that he promotes an active, healthy debate. In fact, that's one of the things that he talked about that he really liked about Wentz coming out of college, was that Wentz would argue with this offensive coordinator all the time. And a lot of coaches that would turn people off, and for dee-fah-LIP-oh and Frank Reich and Doug Peterson, that was really intriguing because to them, and it might be because they're all former quarterbacks. I don't think dee-fah-LIP-oh was a quarterback in the NFL, but he was a quarterback in college, and Peterson and Reich, obviously, they were backup quarterbacks in the NFL. They were all quarterbacks, and so they kind of get it when a quarterback has very strong opinions about the offense. And so it might just be because of their background, how willing they were to engage in that debate. And so he's talked a couple of times in Philadelphia about how much he enjoys the pushback that he gets from quarterbacks when they've got kind of different opinions about what might work best. And to him, it's to make sure that they can find a consensus that everybody can agree to, instead of kind of implementing the plan that he has in place. So those are all things that I think are really positive. Obviously, he's a second-time coordinator, and his first time, statistically, it wasn't that great. There's some things to be concerned about, whether or not he can kind of manage the coordinator position. He's obviously a super talented quarterbacks coach, and he's extremely well regarded in that respect. But whether or not he can kind of move that into an offensive coordinator position when you have to manage all of these things, put plans into place for what you want kind of the offensive line to do, what you want the running backs to do, what you want the tight ends to do, as well as the quarterback. I mean, that's, to be seen. I talked to a couple of people about his time in Cleveland as an offensive coordinator. They all had super positive things to say. I don't think anyone had anything negative to say, actually. But, and they said, like, hey, given the pieces he had around him, it was actually really surprising that they were able to do some of the stuff that they did. I mean, Gary Barnidge, of all people, made the Pro Bowl. He extracted, I think, a 1,000-yard season from Taylor Gabriel, who's like a wide receiver 4 in most teams. He got 900-plus yards from both running backs, Duke Johnson and Isaiah Crowell. It was Josh McCown's, I think it's still his second best statistical season to date, Josh McCown's. The other one being that weird year he had in 2013 with the Chicago Bears. Yeah. And the Mark Trestman offense with Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall. You pulled out a really good year from Josh McCown. And then McCown had to go on IR, and he had Johnny Manziel, and he pulled out a much better year from Manziel. But at the same time, the offense ranked 32nd in the NFL in points scored. And so, it could be, obviously, you've got the worst personnel in the league. You're going to have, potentially the worst ability to score points. But, you'd expect, this wonder kid offensive coordinator to, pull them up a little bit. And I think by DVOA, they're a little bit better, something like 27th, 28th. And that's more indicative, indicator of how good they could be.
But we actually had a question come in through the mailbag, basically asking what can we learn about him from his time in Cleveland. And the biggest takeaway that you could really have was just, even with the terrible surrounding situation and an ownership that wouldn't know its butt from a hole in the ground, he was able to at least get something out of people, regardless of the fact that he was able to
and remember, I think this is the season they found out the day after the draft, the day after the first round of the draft, that they weren't getting Josh Gordon or something like that.
The thing we planned our entire draft strategy around, that's not going to be a thing.
Yeah,
I feel like a member of the Bills now.
Yeah, and they had an all-time bad front office. It's not just the ownership, but the front office was just well, we knew about the Josh Gordon thing, but no, we weren't going to draft a receiver. Are you kidding me?
As opposed to the front office of the Browns now, which leaves before 5, apparently, or so it has been told.
But if you take a look at a lot of the concepts that he implemented with the Browns and some of the concepts that he implemented with the Eagles. If you want to take a look at which concepts he seems to be drawn towards, that one's a little bit tough just because in 2015 with the Browns, he had a much different personnel set. He keeps on talking about kind of the stuff that he wants to see, players do well. But he is a big fan of taking advantage of the inherent weaknesses of a zone or a man heavy kind of game plan from the opponent. And so even with the Browns, and especially with the Eagles, they would run a lot of, rub concepts and pick concepts against man coverage, a lot of bunch formations when they saw teams that were very likely to play man coverage, especially in the red zone. And against zone coverage, run a couple of zone beaters. And you can even, pick zone defenders, which is something he did pretty well. There's a touchdown that he diagrams in one of the Eagles videos where Trey Burton gets wide open because they run a switch concept that confuses the zone defenders and also ends up creating a small rub that ends up getting Trey Burton wide the hell open for a touchdown. So you can probably look forward to that. He tends to like levels concepts a lot, where on one half of the field or in the middle of the field, at the top of the drop, the quarterback will have an option in the deep third of the field, in the middle third, and in the shallow third, in terms of his vision, and he'll be able to put defenders in conflict. So those are the things that he tends to gravitate towards, and so. If you take a look at something like, Bill Belichick's offense, at least contemporarily, the most recent stuff, they tend to do, a zone beater on one side, a man beater on another. They don't do levels as much as, say, the Peyton Manning did or as John dee-fah-LIP-oh did with the Eagles. But they tend to do, route concepts on one side or the other, whereas dee-fah-LIP-oh is a lot more interested in in trying to figure out based off of having the quarterback figure out based off of what they're doing, implementing an entire play essentially that attacks that coverage concept. The quarterback Carson and then Nick Foles both had a lot of latitude at the line of scrimmage to change plays, not as much as like Tom Brady does, but a lot. And so very often they'll call 2 plays in the huddle and they'll pick one play based off of the coverage that they're seeing. So those are the kinds of things that we might be able to see. A lot of levels concepts, some crossing and mesh stuff, and a lot of stuff that takes advantage of the inherent weaknesses of one type of coverage versus the other. So you'll see defenders in conflict on like a corner or like a smash corner concept where you've got one receiver beneath a zone defender and one receiver on top of the zone defender, and the zone defender basically has to choose, that sort of stuff. So nothing that's like that attaches itself to a particular style of aggressiveness or passing depth. He doesn't seem to be a guy that is, really deep pass friendly like North Turner was, or really short pass friendly like Musgrave was. He really does seem like somebody who is very adaptive in his game plan. And so you'll see aggressiveness in some situations. You'll see conservatism in other situations. In the red zone, they tend to be aggressive. He mentioned a couple of times. He mentioned in the presser with the Vikings, as well as when he was talking about red zone offense with the Eagles, that they call it touchdown check down, which is every coach says that essentially. But he implements it pretty well, where the quarterback's eyes read for a touchdown, and then if they can't find one at the last second, kind of move to a check down. And the fact that he talks about quarterbacks a lot when he's in the red zone, kind of goes back to his history as a quarterback, but B, tells us we'll probably continue to see a high degree of passing attempts for the quarterback in the red zone, which we didn't with North Turner, and we did with Pat Shurmur. So yeah, I mean, those are like tendencies that you could potentially pick up on, but again, he doesn't. My understanding of his offense is that it will be difficult based on his history to find schematic tendencies, because he seems like the kind of person that will change those based on the personnel he has around him, which I feel like I'm just describing a guy that's like, yeah, this is how a perfect offensive coordinator is. Oh, by the way, that's John dee-fah-LIP-oh. But that's the information I have available to me. And so right. I know everyone's like, yeah, you want a coordinator that like adapts to the personnel he has around him. No, he happens to be that, but it genuinely does seem to be the case.
Just wanted to let you know the Indianapolis Colts coach is still Frank Reich. Just wanted to let our listeners know that this has not changed during the broadcast. So we have all this information, and obviously we will be parsing through anything that comes in and overanalyzing every single thing that is said by him as far as quarterback situation, as far as what we should expect. But the thing that has stuck out the most this week has been his love of Dalvin Cook. Can we talk a little bit about the comments he's made about Dalvin Cook and how excited Cook is about this?
Yeah, so Dalvin Cook has probably also talked to like Latavius Murray, who mentioned that he liked dee-fah-LIP-oh a lot. And dee-fah-LIP-oh in his presser mentioned that the Philadelphia Eagles were very excited. They had him very high on the draft board, Dalvin Cook, and the Eagles did need a running back, so they ended up trading for Jay, but they were really enamored with Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook ends up tweeting out comeback player of the year. So, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of excitement about what this might mean. It's he's certainly a guy that should be able to take advantage of Dalvin Cook's skill set. What's nice is that he hasn't really worked with a running back situation where your running back is like kind of predefined. Like he was the quarterback's coach, I think, at the time when Latavius Murray was largely the primary running back in Oakland, but for the most part, he hasn't had like a primary running back. And here, obviously, the Vikings are going to lean on Cook and then have complementary backs do complementary back things. But yeah, I mean, it might be his first time being able to run an offense where you've got a running back that can basically do everything. Some of the stuff that he did with Duke Johnson and Isaiah Crowell, really exciting. It also kind of reminds me that Duke Johnson is really friggin' fast in space. A lot of like wheel routes and stuff down the field. So we might even see Dalvin Cook run some like routes down the field and get targeted when they do go empty. That would be fun, just to see him like go up for a deep ball like 25, 30 yards down the field against some poor linebacker.
Some linebacker just going, what the hell just happened? Why are we this far back past the line of scrimmage? How did they have this amount of time to protect their, whoever it is, quarterback?
Right.
I was about to name a name before I realized that would age the podcast horribly.
Super controversial, too. I mean, you can't just pick your quarterback.
No, God, no. That would be absurd. You can do that in February?
Yeah, right.
I hate the stat that came out on Twitter today about how since 1993, no quarterback for the Vikings has started game one of the season 3 times consecutively since Dante Culpepper.
Christ.
I hate that stat so much. I had to like double check it twice. It's like, really? That's really the best part is that if Sam Bradford magically started for the Vikings this season, it wouldn't count because Shaun Hill 2 seasons ago was the starter of week 1. Yeah, so that's where we're at. So
there's this thing about how like and we may have even gotten this question, but there's this thing about like how Vikings fans always want the next quarterback. Like, what's the deal with that?
Yeah,
did we get that question?
We did get that question actually. Let's just touch that real quick while we're
because
here.
We've never friggin' had a quarterback.
Yeah, Damian Barrett asks, newbie question, why are the Vikings fans so obsessive about looking for new quarterbacks? Is this a league-wide thing or just something that happens in Minnesota? No, this is a Minnesota/Cleveland thing.
Right. I mean, like, you know, if you're the same. It's like
we hate Green Bay for many reasons, one of which being that for the past 20 years they've had a combination of Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. Like, it's hard to that amount of stability is an incredibly annoying amount of stability.
You know, we can meaningfully debate Kirk Cousins. We can meaningfully debate Case Keenum. And those are all like reasonable debates to have. I mean, Cousins has put together some really good seasons. I think not last year, we're calling the 2017 season last year at this point, right?
Yes.
Okay, so not last year. The year before, in 2016, he had a really good statistical season. Case Keenum, obviously, this year had a much better statistical season than he's ever had. Bridgewater's been kind of the guy that he hasn't statistically produced a lot, but has been, I think, on film, a very good young quarterback. And so you've got these 3 debates that I think are all pretty reasonable. And that's why, there's so much like gnashing of teeth in like Vikings Twitter and stuff like that. And so you'll see one Vikings fan saying, we should, cut bait with Teddy. Case Keenum's not the answer. Sign Kirk Cousins. He's, the best possible chance to win. And, someone else is going to be just equally vociferous about the fact that like, hey, Kirk Cousins hasn't been consistent. He's kind of relied on having a good, supporting cast. And even though he'll have that here, he won't be able to elevate the team. You should sign Case Keenum because we know what he can do with this team. Or, hey, Teddy Bridgewater's the youngest. He's got the most upside. People all have reasonable arguments. And so it really feels like Vikings Twitter in general is impatient about quarterback, but I don't think there's anything unusual about the situation that they're in. It makes sense. And so, yeah, which is why everyone started reading into like dee-fah-LIP-oh's statements, which is like, he said the same thing in Oakland, in Cleveland, in Philadelphia, and now here about what he looks for in a quarterback. The same 3 things. And people are like, oh, he's clearly like subtweeting Teddy. Like, what? Let's not like take a look at some of the stuff that he said in the presser and say, that means he's looking for this quarterback. Everyone knows that I personally think that if Bridgewater's healthy, he deserves a legitimate shot at starting. And that doesn't necessarily mean, he should be given the job outright. But, everyone knows that that's kind of what I think. But I don't want to like say, oh, dee-fah-LIP-oh said the first thing that he looks for in a quarterback is character. Who has high character? Teddy Bridgewater. That means they're starting Teddy. That's dumb as hell. Stop.
Yeah. Leave that to us for like 6 weeks from now.
You're right. But I mean, like, Case Keenum's like a bad person now. Like he's a high character guy too. What's going on? And like, maybe he needs Sam Bradford. Like what? You can't. I mean, he doesn't because Sam Bradford's dead. But you can't just look at him saying, first I look for a high character quarterback when he said that in Cleveland. When freaking they had Johnny Manziel on the roster, but they said that in Cleveland. He said that in Philadelphia. He said that in Oakland. That's just a thing that he has always said. He's not saying it in particular to target a quarterback. Now, if you're trying to say, in my opinion, Teddy Bridgewater is the highest character quarterback, and so you'll give him, the first shot. I just think that that's just kind of weird because I don't think the other quarterbacks on the roster. But at least it's a little bit more reasonable than him like saying it specifically to signal that he wants Teddy. But it's still not a very good argument. He says, hey, I look for accuracy and timing and decision making. And like, yeah, that's what you should look for in a quarterback. That's great. I don't think that he means that he's looking for Teddy. Now, I think it's easier for you to say something like, well, I do think that, Keenum is the most accurate. He's the best decision maker, whatever. That means he'll pick Keenum. I think that's a more reasonable argument, but I don't think that he is saying those things to indicate that he secretly wants one of these quarterbacks. So it's so weird that people were parsing out the stuff that he said at the presser as like some indication that he secretly prefers this quarterback or that quarterback. No,
it's the off season and we're starving.
I mean, yeah.
And it's only February.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting 6 to 8 months, but
it's going to be a roller coaster.
We at least wait for him to have looked at the quarterbacks. Like, it's not like he spent time studying which quarterback he was going to pick while he was prepping for the friggin' Super Bowl.
No, nonsense. If the offensive coordinator we want is the Bill Belichick style of he's on the plane back to Philadelphia and he's already looking up stats and looking at tape and everything about the Vikings quarterback situation. He knew this call was coming, so.
Right. If, in 4 weeks, someone asks him which quarterback he prefers and he says something interesting, we could talk about it then. I doubt he will say anything interesting because I think we'll probably have to go through like OTAs and stuff before anything. But, whatever. He says that he gets as much input as he wants on the quarterback situation, which I think is kind of interesting. So if he wants to let, Zimmer and Stefanski and Spielman make that decision, then he'll let them make that decision. If he has strong feelings about like, we absolutely should not sign Kirk Cousins, then they won't, right? He gets as little or as much input as he wants. So that's kind of interesting. I imagine that's all he's doing right now is looking at which quarterback he might want.
Well, you mentioned him, so let's bring him up. Stefanski. He is not allowed to be interviewed nor hired by the New York Football Giants, and this has managed to upset a few people. Now, the two theories are that A, Minnesota wants to keep him, and B, that he didn't necessarily want to go to New York and wanted the Vikings to just block it so he didn't have to, so he could, I guess, save face. Do we know if either of these theories are actually true, or do we just go under the assumption that this is just, that people can be upset about it, but this happens all the time?
Yeah, I think it's a bad rule and that it sucks and that it's a shit move, but it's the rule. And I do think that the Vikings genuinely want to keep him as a quarterback's coach and an offensive coordinator in waiting because dee-fah-LIP-oh is a super hot name in coaching circles, and he may only be an offensive coordinator for 1 year. And so they've got someone in-house who can learn and become the offensive coordinator. And I think that's why. I don't think it's because they wanted to say F you to Shermer or the Giants. I don't think, I don't think there's anything like at play here. I think it's unlikely that Stefanski did not want the offensive coordinator job and wanted the Vikings to block for him. It's been a movement for a while. Like I've been hearing from a lot of people that he did really want the job and that he was tapped for that job and stuff like that. And that's I think it's likely that, it would have been nice for him to get an offensive coordinating job, even if he wasn't going to be a play caller. As for like the reason the move doesn't, the reason the Vikings blocking it stands out is because the nature of the rule doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Because it's a lateral move according to the NFL. So they only have two basically levels of coach in the NFL. They've got head coach and they've got assistant coach. And you cannot block a promotion, essentially, a movement from an assistant coach to a head coach. You can delay an interview if it's during the playoffs. That's it. But you cannot block a team from interviewing a coach under contract if they're an assistant coach and they're interviewing for a head coach spot. That's it. You can block any assistant coach to assistant coach move. And I think it's kind of ridiculous because we know that offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator are a step above position coach, right? And sometimes lines get blurred, right? Because we've had offensive coordinator / quarterback coach. And we've had, I think we've even seen quarterback coach / assistant head coach where there's already an offensive coordinator, but they're like in between. And so that, complicates things. But, for the most part, like we know that offensive coordinator is above position coach, right? And we know position coach is above assistant position coach. And we know assistant position coach is above quality control specialist, right? Like we know those things. But the way the NFL has codified its rule book around, coaching hires and stuff like that, they're all assistant coach. And I think the absurdity of that really kind of plays into why it stands out as a bad move. Like no one gets upset when a running backs coach gets blocked from interviewing to be a running backs coach. At least on our end. I know that this has happened to the Vikings in the past where they've blocked a position coach from interviewing for a position coach job elsewhere. And that position coach has gotten pretty angry about it. I understand why they would get angry about it, by the way, but that doesn't feel as like unjust, right? As a position coach getting blocked from a coordinator position. So yeah, that's the nature of the rule. There's interesting discussions to be had about like labor rights and what it means when you sign a contract and whether or not you're sacrificing security for choice and stuff like that. And whether or not that should apply to players too. And, that's fine that you can have that discussion. But I think the thing that like the reason it stands out is because you cannot do that for head coaches, but you can for coordinators, even though this would clearly be a promotion.
It's just odd that that the people who were so up in arms about it. But if you were to look at the situation involving the Philadelphia Eagles right now, I mean, their offensive coordinator is gone. Their quarterback's coach is now gone. And who are they left with? Are they going to hire Ben McAdoo, or are they going to end up hiring from within and promoting Deuce Staley?
Yeah, and what's interesting, so Deuce Staley is started coaching in 2011, right? He was a quality control specialist for 2 years, then became the running backs coach. Or maybe not even 2011, actually. He might have only been coaching for 3 years. I should have looked that up before I said anything. But he's not been coaching for very long. He's been a running backs coach. The thing is, he was plan B for Pat Shurmur. So if Shurmur couldn't get Stefanski, he was going to try and get Staley. But the Eagles just lost two of their coaches, their offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. If Staley is good enough to be an offensive coordinator for the Giants, in theory, he should be, an interesting offensive coordinator candidate for the Eagles and could potentially be promoted up from within. And so they would definitely block it, although that would not be as egregious, right? Because he probably ends up getting an offensive coordinator position with the Eagles instead of with the Giants. But that, presents an interesting element because if they don't want to promote Deuce Staley to offensive coordinator, but they also don't want to lose additional offensive staff, it would make sense for them to block Staley from pursuing an offensive coordinator job with the Giants. Also, it does weird, right? It's Deuce Staley. I remember him. He's pretty good.
It's a very recent retiree / coach situation now. Yeah.
Yeah. He started coaching in 2011 as a quality control. So I was right. So 2011, 2012 quality control coach, and then a position coach for 4 years, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 5 years, 2017. You got to add the one when you subtract the year.
Is that a thing? Is that what you got to do?
Yeah. Whoops.
He's rising up quickly. I mean, who knows? He could be the head coach of the Colts soon. Speaking of, Frank Reich is still the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. In fact, he has taken a picture with a newspaper with today's date on it.
Which, congratulations to him and the Colts for now.
Deuce Staley may be coaching there by the end of the show.
Right. They could end up being depleted. Interestingly, so speaking of former players who are like position coaches for the Eagles, Greg Lewis, I think, is still the wide receivers coach for the Eagles.
Correct.
That's so cool, man. I love Greg Lewis.
Yeah, he had a really good 30 seconds for the Vikings, but it was a really, really good 30 seconds.
It was a great 30 seconds.
Yeah. Like, as far as 30 seconds go, that was pretty sweet. Probably the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I have talked to people who
he's now a wide receivers coach for the Chiefs.
Oh, he's now
he followed Andy Reid, yeah.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I've talked to people who were at US Bank Stadium for the quote-unquote Minneapolis Miracle, who were also at the Metrodome for the Greg Lewis catch, which, I mean, if you're going to be there for both, Jesus.
Yeah, right.
But apparently the Minneapolis Miracle was louder than the Greg Lewis catch. But the Greg Lewis catch is still the loudest thing I've ever heard. So I can only imagine like the ringing of eardrums and like all of I just envision Sean Payton's children having to wear headphones like he did for the Super Bowl thing.
Right.
Just wearing them for like forever after that game. So the other thing that we can talk about is the Kirk Cousins situation. Now, as we covered at during the last episode, Kirk Cousins is not expected to be the quarterback of the Washington football team any longer. Alex Smith has been given quite the Brinks truck, and he will be presumably playing in Washington. Now, the rumor out of Washington is also that they are going to franchise tag Kirk Cousins without playing him, meaning they are looking for another team to pick up both the tab and to trade for him. Now, it's not that you can't do this. It's that it's just a dick move, especially at this point when there's a chance not even the Browns are going to touch this.
Right. So that's the thing that like gets me about this is that so not only have you like kind of refused to talk to Cousins, so like that's one of the things is that Washington did not reach out to Cousins after the season to resign him. They did not attempt to. There's like some weird politics going on. They've got a shitty organization.
They don't even talk to the players they're trading, apparently.
Yeah, I guess. I'm safe. Whoops.
Here's the Simpsons gif.
Which, I mean, congratulations. You got out of Washington, so you're in a better spot. But, I think it would be weird because, like, you're really restricting where Cousins can go because they have to be able to take on that contract. And then, of course, they'll, like, renegotiate it. But they have to be able to take on that contract initially. And that, like, it's better than, I guess, like, from the perspective of the team, it's better than nothing because you could get, like, a 6th-round pick or whatever. Because, again, only, like, 4 teams will have enough cap space to trade for him. And they'd just rather not. But, yeah, it's just, like, you've been such a dick to him over the course of 3 years that just to do this, come on. Like, yeah, this is another
impressive.
Thing where it's like...
It's very, very impressive. It's also awful.
Yeah, just, like, let him chase his paper. And here's the thing. You might be in a better spot if you just let him go because of the compensatory pick process than if you, like, franchise him and trade him because you have to trade this, like, $30 million contract or something because he gets paid 144% of the franchise tag.
Yes. And thanks to the Jimmy Garoppolo signing, that tag went up.
Yeah. God. So like
Jimmy G is getting lots of nice like cards and flowers from other quarterbacks around the league.
Right. So he could cost like $35 million or whatever, and then a team acquires him and then tries to like restructure that contract for a long-term guarantee for only $30 million, right? Yeah. And that's just tough. And you might get a 4th round pick or a 5th or something like that, or instead let him walk, get a 3rd round pick. Like a year later, it's instead of in the 2018 draft, you get in the 2019 draft, and so there's like some discounting there. But it's better, I think.
Well, what are the other options? I mean, if all 31 other teams just look at it and go, "We're not biting,"
they have to absorb the whole friggin' contract, or hope he refuses to sign it.
Exactly. Right? So they end up getting put into that situation where, I mean, Carson Palmer basically retired due to his hatred of the front office of Cincinnati and the deal that he was getting. He retired for a full year. Like he didn't want to play quarterback for him, and eventually he came back and was able to be, and as a result was able to be like signed over to Oakland. And man, that's that's a year of his prime that he had to get out of. So I'm just
it would be much more interesting. Actually, this would be wicked cool if they signed him to a long-term deal and then traded that. Like if some other team, and this would be illegal, right? So, shadow negotiated.
Didn't this happen to the McNabb? Wasn't this what Washington did with McNabb? Washington signed some extension to McNabb, and then the Vikings took it on.
Maybe. I don't think that was intentional, though. But the fact that it was Washington makes this all the more interesting.
Well, when it happened, people were saying, yeah, but he's not expected to be sticking around. Like that was the thing that the talking heads were saying after he had signed it. Like it was like a Monday night game. It was
it's very NBA. That's so weird.
Yeah. It's just
it's a sign and trade. Come on.
Yeah, it's a sign and trade. It'll be fine. Yeah, they extended him, and then the Vikings ended up picking him up after all the talking heads were like, yeah, but he's not going to stick around.
But I guess maybe that's something worth looking into. But yeah, if they sign him to a long-term deal under the auspices of another team shadow negotiating the long-term deal and then they trade him, that would be cool, so long as he gets a say, right? Like, if he doesn't get a say, it's just like, oh, cheap contract for the Browns. But I guess he wouldn't sign. That would be kind of interesting, because then you can leverage and get a draft pick and all that. It's way cooler than a franchise tag, man. Jesus.
He's just going to end up owning a giant chunk of the Browns by the end of this. I feel like it's like the highest form of the Darrelle Revis contract legacy is the quarterback version of it. For a while, we thought it was Sam Bradford, but no, it is Kirk Cousins. Nope, it's going to be Kirk Cousins who is going to own a large chunk of either the Browns, or maybe he just gets a group of people together and ends up being the owner / quarterback of the Panthers. Just finds a way to muscle out Cam Newton, send him somewhere. He just becomes owner, and because you want your owner to have massive head trauma, so.
Right. Well, I mean, I feel like the first thing that came to mind was actually in Charlotte, Michael Jordan. Can he play for the Hornets? Like, does he just get to?
They had a thing, or back when Jordan turned 50. I can't believe I remember this. I remember this, but not where my car keys were this afternoon. So there was an article out on ESPN when Jordan turned 50. And they had this big thing about Jordan at 50. Jordan turns 50. Interview series, blah. And they broke down how difficult it would be for him to actually go onto the court and play. It would be possible, but there weren't necessarily steps like in place to prevent it from happening. But it was still like all of these people would have to sign off on it. And if he wanted to like Richard Nixon Black Saturday, all of these people and absorb the roles. Down to assistant coach. Yes, he could be on the floor, but he shouldn't be.
I wouldn't put that past him, though. I could see Jordan doing that.
enough.
I mean, he basically did that with the wizard / bullet / senator. What are they?
They were the Wizards at the time, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, there was some interview with him at that time. It might have been part of that whole like Jordan at 50 thing where he was saying, I go out there and I'm running. My mind's as sharp as it ever was, but yeah, that whole 50 thing and my body not moving. That's the problem. Like my mind's there. It's just that my body, like my arms, won't move as fast as I want them to, or I spend hours.
At least he finally admits that, because when he was coaching the Wizards, he was like, it was embarrassing because I was playing better than them.
Yes,
and the problem was that he was right. Like that's like a huge issue.
Like turns out that's a real thing.
So Kirk Cousins owns part of the Panthers because Jerry Richardson's out.
Yep.
Blocks P. Diddy from buying part of the Panthers, of course.
Good.
Wow. Okay.
He's referring to himself now as Brother Love, which that's a 90s wrestler guy. Like, no, okay, we're not gonna go down that.
We're on the same page now.
Yeah. There's some new information had come to light, dude.
Yeah. All right. So blocks Brother Love from the ownership bid. Maybe he can be in an ownership bid with Snoop Lion.
Oh God.
Get some equity, and then somehow they negotiate what this means for the salary cap, and he could play.
Yeah. And get Cam Newton out of Carolina, because apparently the people of Carolina do not appreciate or love Cam Newton. They're really big on Christian McCaffrey for some reason. It's an unspoken reason, but they're very into.
Weird. But not Curtis Samuel, the guy that's basically the same as weird.
No. A buddy's dad was talking to him about how much he despised Kirk or how much he despised Cam Newton, but had a lot of positive things to say about Christian McCaffrey. And like, really, that they don't play the same position, but sure.
I'm sure Christian McCaffrey could sling it.
Why not? At this point, I'm sure he's the white Joe Webb. So, the Kirk Cousins situation. If we were to look at the Kirk Cousins deal, if he's franchised, then that pretty much puts the Vikings out, doesn't it? Because the Vikings still want to put a few members of our defense into extensions to keep them around a little longer. Maybe.
The more I'm thinking about it, the more, like, I guess it makes sense for the Vikings, which I hate because I've been very skeptical of Kirk Cousins this entire career. But I think it still would, because I think if you have to sacrifice essentially 2 defensive players to sign your quarterback of the future, which, again, I don't think you have to, because I think they're currently on the roster. It's either Bridgewater or Keenum, which just, it hurts me to say that. But, I think Keenum is a below average quarterback. Cousins is an average to above average quarterback. The difference in salary, I think, is enough to justify signing Keenum instead, unless Keenum goes for more than 19-20 million. But Cousins is going to go for like 30-some million. His franchise is above 30-some million, I think. I don't think that puts the Vikings out. I think that, from their perspective, it would just be quarterback's going to be the most influential position to have on the roster. Sometimes you have to overpay to get that. But that means we get to and the problem is they don't have a ton of picks, so that might be what put them out. I don't think it's the cap stuff, but the problem is, then we have to replace 2 or 3 defensive players who are going to be free agents in 2019, and I don't think that those defensive players, whoever they are, Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, Trey Waynes, whoever they are, is going to be as impactful as an average to above average quarterback could be. I don't think it puts the Vikings out. I think there's a reasoning behind it. It still makes me uncomfortable because in order to overpay at one position, you need to be really good at underpaying another position. And with a quarterback, it has to be another several positions, right? Because of how much cap space they consume. And so, the Vikings do underpay Adam Thielen. They've got him under control for a little bit, and that's nice. They do have, some young players that are underpaid, but they have contracts coming up. If you can continue to draft, young guys to replace them, I don't think that's a sure sign. I don't think any team has done that. Like, I think the Seahawks kind of banked on their ability to do that, and they can't. I don't know. But I don't think it puts the Vikings out of the running. It just makes it even more difficult.
Yeah. It's one of those. Well, we can take this route where the angle or the angle of the road or the gradient isn't nearly as steep, and we'll be able to keep some of our defense. Or we can just travel up this and hope we don't fall backwards.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. The thing that I think makes it difficult to have this discussion is that on paper, we know that upgrading the quarterback position is the single best way to help a team out. But we have emotional connections to Anthony Barr and Stephon Diggs and Trey Waynes and, Eric Kendricks and all that.
This team is too damn likable. That's our problem. It's too likable.
We like these players. We know how good they are. And we like watch them play and we see them play well and we see how impactful they are. We know in our head they're not nearly as impactful as a good quarterback, but it just feels like you add one and lose another. Like it just feels like it's a 1-to-1 thing when it really is not on paper. Well, so that always makes this conversation difficult.
And if we're going to follow if we're going to follow the rule that I like to follow, which is what would the people in our division like us to do the most? And we should be doing the opposite of that. The Packers, the Lions, and the Bears would like to see us overpay someone, possibly somebody who's not necessarily proven, or just been put in a bad situation for years. But they'd like to see us in a situation where our defense is weaker. Yeah,
maybe, but I don't know if the Bears would be super happy to see the Vikings have stability at quarterback either, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe. Because, I think if you're the Detroit Lions or whatever, you've just become very familiar with how good the Vikings are at building their defense. Mm-hmm. And so you might just assume they're going to fix whatever problems come up.
We need someone to be – I think the quote from their from their new coach, Matt Patricia, who I still maintain, while shaved, looks like a Best Buy salesman.
Yeah, right.
So, but they were saying, we need a running back of any sort that we can rely on, somebody who can actually run the ball. They need somebody to be able to make it through this wall that Linval Joseph has created. So, yeah, the Lions are very familiar with just how impressive our defense tends to be, and would love any situation where it wouldn't be as dominating.
Right, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if they're I think they're always going to be able to solve a problem that comes up on their defense. So it really depends on how you think they think, right? Because if you think they think that the defense is a static concept, then yeah, it makes a lot of sense for another team to want the Vikings to overpay an average quarterback and get weaker on defense. But if you think that they think that there's some mystique with Zimmer, then it doesn't matter how many defensive players they lose, because they think that they'll always be able to come up with a defensive player to replace them. And I think that's a dangerous assumption on the Vikings' part, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was an assumption that the Lions had, oh, you've had 2 problems on defense and now they've been solved, and great. You're always going to solve problems that appear on your defense. Friggin' fantastic. That sort of thing. So who knows?
Also, just a quick note, newly engaged Carson Wentz has tweeted out from his verified account, "Good-looking coach, gonna miss working with you." So it appears that Carson Wentz also believes that Indianapolis has found its coach in Coach Reich.
So Frank Reich has put in a request to interview Chargers wide receivers coach Nick Sirianni for their offensive coordinator position, and the Chargers have granted this request. Miracle of miracles.
They might actually have a coaching staff at some point soon.
Right.
I did enjoy.
This also means that their special teams coordinator could end up being the Chargers special teams coordinator, could end up being the Chargers wide receivers coach, former Vikings wide receivers coach George Stewart.
It's a very odd family that exists out there. Also, congratulations to Carson Wentz on getting engaged. Let's go to the mailbag to our first question from Kyle Slaby, who asks, what would it take to trade for Carson Wentz?
God damn it. Multiple firsts. Don't do it, man. They're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. Why are we asking this question? So someone asked me, hey, Arif, how would you feel if the Vikings traded for Carson Wentz? And obviously the answer is conflicted. I have no idea why you would expect any other answer. But I cheer for the Vikings. I like to see them win. If Carson Wentz has to get a friggin' ring with the Vikings, at least the Vikings win. Like, that's how I feel. Obviously, that's how I feel about it. But, you know, it's a thing. Plus, I'd be able to talk to Carson Wentz, which would be super funny.
I'm just envisioning. Can the Vikings and the Eagles do like if the Vikings and the Eagles decide to do like a scrimmage, like a co-team scrimmage? Cool.
Yeah.
We will be taking all of the money for the entire year and flying Arif out there to cover it. And
no question.
Like, we're going to get matching donations from Cover 32, like all of these other places. I'm sure Andy Carlson will even throw in a buck or two just to like make this a thing. We just need to get Carson Wentz and Arif in the same place at the same time.
That has to happen.
Yeah, like that. Can we just like somehow plant this in the head of Rick Spielman? Can we just get like a co-scrimmage like that? Because there's a decent chance the Vikings and the Eagles are going to play week 1. Like, right. There's a really good chance of that. So let's just, let's just make sure everyone's familiar with everyone again and hope there's no fights between the teams during the scrimmage. It'll be fine. Also asked by Kyle Slaby, outside of quarterback, are there prototypes or playing styles that dee-fah-LIP-oh seems to prefer on offense? Example, mobile lineman versus power scheme, quick wide receivers versus large wide receiver, power backs versus scat backs.
Like a lot of offensive coordinators, especially offensive coordinators with passing backgrounds, along the offensive line, he seems to defer to the offensive line coach as the person who designs the running game. And they've even kind of, I think, mentioned this in passing in Philadelphia, that even though Peterson calls the running plays, the design comes down to the offensive line coach. And I think that the same thing would happen here. So I don't think you'll see an offensive line kind of emphasis that they'll choose to have a power style running scheme or zone style running scheme and then tailor their offensive lineman acquisition strategies to that. I think that they'll just concede to Tony Sperano. And in this case, I think that they'll just keep with sort of the zone running stuff just because it was so successful for Cook. As for tight ends and wide receivers and running backs, I think that he always wants to have a pass-catching running back on the roster. He's really excited about matchups a lot of the times and exploiting those matchups. And, he talked a lot about, what advantages having Jay Ajayi and LeGarrette Blount mean and what advantages it was to have, Duke Johnson with the Cleveland Browns and the way that you can exploit some of those matchups. And so I think they'll try to either retain Jerick McKinnon or acquire some sort of pass catching running back. And that could be, in free agency. I've mentioned Rex Burkhead a couple of times. If not him, Dion Lewis, also from the Patriots, would be really good at that. Or, in the draft, there's like 80,000 potential people that might be able to fill that role. Rashad Penny from San Diego State, Kalen Ballage from Arizona State, Ikram Wadley from Iowa, who I don't love a lot, but, evidently on tape looked a lot better than he did at the Senior Bowl. So I think that that's something that they'll probably pursue. At wide receiver, I think that he has appreciated having a diversity of types of talent at wide receiver. He had a quick type in Nelson, a speedy type in Torrey, and a big, red zone guy in Alshon. He didn't quite have that in Cleveland. Again, Josh Gordon just got suspended right before they were able to acquire any guys. So, he had to deal with the pre-Corey Coleman, Rashard Higgins. He had Andrew Hawkins and friggin' Taylor Gabriel as his receivers, which great. I think that's not going to tell us a lot about what receivers the Vikings might get. I also prefer a diversity of receiver types. I mentioned this on the Football Machine, and because Diggs and Thielen are already versatile in that they're both speedy and that they're both quick and they both have the ability to go deep or win intermediate or do after catch stuff, the only thing you're really missing in the receiver core is a big body type because Treadwell is obviously not going to do it. And then, that doesn't mean that he'll necessarily pursue a big body type. we had a caller call in and ask, like, are those types overrated? And they are. They cost too much to get a lot of times for the amount that they provide. But I do think that that's something that the Vikings will look into. At tight end, he deployed a lot of multiple tight end sets, but at the same time, they had Trey Burton and Zach Ertz and Brent Selleck. They had 3 very talented tight ends. Trey Burton, by the way, is a restricted free agent, and I'm pretty sure the Eagles will keep him. But, think about it. Ertz can kind of do everything. Like, he's not like Gronkowski, right? Like, Gronkowski's both a better receiver and blocker and pass protector. But Ertz is a decent blocker and a really friggin' good receiver. And I wouldn't be surprised if he tried to use Rudolph in kind of the same way. One of the things that he really liked about Zach Ertz is how intelligent of a tight end he was. He mentioned that in a couple of interviews. And how Zach Ertz understands leverage better than any other receiver. So tight end, receiver, or running back that he's had the pleasure of working with. And he talked about that a lot, that Ertz really understands how to exploit the way defenders are aligned and how they're leveraged. And so if you're looking for a type, it would be smart tight end. Tight end's a super difficult position to coach because they got to do everything. And smart here doesn't mean friggin' Harvard. Like, Gronkowski's a super smart tight end on the field and a super dumb dude.
You can be really good at something and horrible at everything else in your life.
Right.
Yeah, it's totally a thing. Jake the Snake Roberts is a perfect example of that. Sorry, the recent Crime and Sports episode this week was about Jake Roberts and his alcohol and drug issues. And there's a great Netflix documentary about him, by the way, if you haven't had a chance to catch that. But terrible at everything else in his life, but Jesus, was he good.
Right. And so, Gronkowski understands leverage, he understands option routes, and he's a dumb guy. And so, a tight end that makes all the right decisions, maybe that's the type, but, maybe that's just who he had and he appreciated that. So I don't know, we'll see a lot in terms of types that we'll get out of it. He mentioned that he likes athleticism in quarterbacks. He's mentioned this, again, several times. He mentioned this in Cleveland, in Oakland, in Philadelphia, and now with the Vikings. And he is, every single time, the way that he has defined athleticism is not by quarterbacks who have the ability to gain first downs with their legs, but by quarterbacks who have the ability to move in the pocket. In fact, the way that he defined athleticism in his most recent press conference would point to Tom Brady being more in tune with what he wants out of athleticism of a quarterback than Joe Webb, which, obviously that's an extreme example meant to demonstrate that you can't just stand at one point in the pocket. You need to be able to move around in the pocket as a means of avoiding pressure, and you need to be able to throw from different launch angles is a phrase he uses a lot. And Webb couldn't do that, and Brady can do that. And so from the perspective of what he's looking for in a quarterback, the way that he defines quarterback athleticism, Brady is a quote-unquote more athletic quarterback than, Joe Webb. And so his type of quarterback is basically not Zach Mettenberger, not Ryan Mallett. And that's who he's looking for. Somebody who isn't just a statue.
Well, maybe we'll be able to accomplish something like that. Maybe.
Right. And again, that applies to friggin' every quarterback the Vikings could potentially sign except for maybe Sam Bradford, who he actually praised for his athleticism when he was in Philadelphia. But, Bradford's knees are shot, so who knows?
Question is from Tim Clark, who asks, which Philadelphia free agents might he bring with him, and which do you like?
I don't actually know which free agents. I think LeGarrette Blount's free agent. He's going to re-sign. Trey Burton, like I mentioned, is a restricted free agent, but I'm pretty confident they're going to keep him. I don't know. They wrapped up Alshon Jeffrey, maybe Torrey Smith. I don't know. I don't know who is a free agent with them, actually. I can look it up for the purpose of this question, though.
Wow. Let's move on to the next question, which I can answer, from Nick Olson, who asks, how can Norse Code be the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC? Only division. You can't have an only division. That's like cutting pizza into one slice. I demand answers. That's referring to the exit, the ending of the show. That's actually partially an inside joke between Dusty and I from Jesus, 7-8 years ago. Back when Dusty and I started the name of our production company, which is Pompous Jerk Productions, which we just loved having PJP on things. So we thought that worked. It was snappy and made a fair amount of sense there. So, no, it is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC, just in case we wanted to make more of it. Yeah.
Remember, you can divide things by one.
You can. So what do we know about the free agent situation in Philadelphia?
So Trey Burton is not a restricted free agent. He's just an unrestricted free agent. Also, he's 26. I thought he was younger. I think they'll keep him. LeGarrette Blount, I think they'll keep him. They would both be relatively easy to keep. Like, I know Burton's going to command a lot more than he currently does. Like, he's got $2.8 million in cap space, and he's going to consume a lot more because he's like an up-and-coming tight end. But I think they'll keep him. I'm not that interested in Darren Sproles anymore. And if we're talking about offensive free agents, that's about it. I mean, yeah, he could get Will Beatty, but like, no, he's old and he was bad when he played. Defensive free agents do include Nigel Bradham. I don't think if they do sign him, that would mean anything with regards to what, John dee-fah-LIP-oh was able to do. Corey Graham is a really good backup safety. I don't think he would have anything to do with that. And that's about it. There's not that many free agents. If Burton is too expensive for the Eagles, that would be a coup, I think, for the Vikings, who definitely need another tight end. I don't think their converted quarterback from Oklahoma is going to do it. I don't think that Blake Bell is a great tight end. But I think that if you added Trey Burton, you'd have 3 starting quality tight ends who specialize in a bunch of different stuff. So that would be cool. But that's the only one I'd be looking at.
John Belk asks, I'd be interested in Arif's thoughts on betting this year, how it went, what he learned, and if he thinks betting on sports is still a good idea.
I mean, it's always a bad idea, but I did come out ahead. I did exactly what Dusty advised against, which was to parlay every single week. So I came out way in the black, which means I got lucky. Like way in the black. I hit 2 weeks with a couple of 14 parlays, so that worked out a lot. What did I learn from betting? I don't know, man. I guess trust the Patriots except in the Super Bowl, because they like never cover the spread, or I guess they didn't win this time. B, I don't respond to trends quickly enough is maybe the thing, is that I was too. It took me too long to respond to how good the Eagles were offensively, which huge shock. But B, just how good the Saints were defensively. It took me a while, so I guess be quicker to react to changes in the NFL. But I don't think I learned a lot from betting. I just got kind of lucky.
There, which is about as much as you can ask for, really.
Yeah,
I put money on the over for the Vikings wins and was generously compensated. So thank you, Vegas, and that's all I learned.
Yeah, I do come out ahead a lot when it comes to season long predictions. Game to game, it's usually luck, but yeah, I mean the over on the Vikings wins the past 3 years was really easy money. So
yeah. that would I think it's my 3rd year in a row of it's either 3rd or 4th year in a row. So I'm enjoying that part anyway. Next question is from Don from Ohio, who is apparently the world's biggest Kyle Sloter fan now.
Yeah, now that Dusty's taking a break from cheering for the Vikings, it's Don now.
Yeah, it's clearly Don, and actually Kyle Sloter, I believe, now follows Don from Ohio.
Yeah, right. Amazing.
So congratulations to you. On a scale of 1 to Kev, where would you rate me as insufferable if Kyle Sloter were named Week 1 starter for 2018?
I mean, I don't know how insufferable you can be if you end up being like that right.
Unless your Twitter account turns into a daily parade of I'm right, here are all the times I'm right.
I mean, I could see that happening is the problem. But right. But I mean, if you took this 1 in 1,000 shot and you're right, I mean, you get a lot of latitude about bragging about it, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, probably pretty insufferable, but there's a ceiling just because holy crap. But yeah, I mean,
it'd be like the guys who, as soon as Russell Wilson was drafted, just put their capes on and like, nope, this is happening. He's going to end up starting. And then week 1, he does really well and then, makes it to the playoffs. No, that would be that level of, it would be that level of just caping. Just, I've been saying it since day 1, been down since day 1.
Yeah. So, your ceiling, I think, is at a 5. I have a lot of faith in you, but I don't think you'll break that ceiling. I'd say your insufferability level will be at 4. So I'm sorry that it's so low. And I know that you wanted the number to be higher.
Yes. Also, any truth to the rumor that the Ben Natan was the one responsible for breaking the Ritz canopy or stealing one of the U.S. Bank Stadium seats? He has been insufferable on Twitter today.
Oh, yeah. I've told him that I'm not talking to him. So.
Insufferable.
He's off. It's terrible.
It's just the random tweets. Just a reminder that Nick Foles didn't fumble away his chance to bring a team back in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl.
Again, there's a ceiling to it because it's the Patriots, but he's been awful.
Kenneth Allen asks, I assume you guys didn't talk about it due to not wanting to forget about the Super Bowl happening, but I was expecting some big game party food hot takes. What's your favorite game day snacks? Where did you watch the Super Bowl at?
I watched it at Yinka's apartment. So, I brought like a slow cooked brisket and that was good. I mean, it's the thing that I like about like slow cooked food is that you can like obviously prepare it beforehand, but there's like a variety of ways you can serve it in like a Super Bowl friendly fashion. So I didn't do that for this. One of the things I was thinking about is you could just make sliders, right? You just like pull it apart because it's like fork tender, right? Because and you just make sliders out of it. That's friggin' delicious. I love wings. But if you wanted to kind of go in a slightly different direction from jalapeno poppers, which I like, or wings, which I like, you could do like a pot roast, but you can like pull it apart and turn them into sliders. Just like add some like pickled onions on top, and it's friggin' amazing.
Oh yeah, and if you're gonna put a brisket in a slow cooker, it's amazing with a bunch of onions in it. So no, that would...
Oh yeah, there were pearl onions in the just beautiful.
Yes, I watched it in a bar in East Grand Forks, Minnesota. Since
the same bar that you
we won the viewing party thing at because we were the only fans left in the building. Yeah, so we
oh, it's you guys.
Yeah, so but we won a bunch of free food and a couple buckets of beer, so we did that. Beer was awful, but they do have a extensive liquor shelf there, and I did end up having to dive into the liquor thing. I don't know about you, but as the week progressed, I was becoming more and more of a Patriots fan, just wanting the Eagles to lose.
Yeah, no, me too. Yinka was cheering for the friggin' Eagles, and I was like, Yinka, come on. And he's like, no, it's the Patriots are evil. I'm like, no. All situational, man.
Yeah, all situational. This is, I realize that there's two bad guys here, but... Right. I think I had referred to this as the 2016 elections of Super Bowls. But yeah,
does cheering for the refs mean voting for Gary Johnson? Is that what that is?
I don't know what that means, but it's close enough. It's not Jill Stein. I know that. Jill Stein, as it turned out, was McDaniels, but that's another story altogether. But as far as all this goes, that was wings, and there was bar wings, and their wings are okay. It wasn't great, but it was like, oh yes, you did put Frank's Red Hot on this, didn't you? And then there was just a couple other like forms of wings, but their nachos are not great, and that was a life choice I later regretted. I did have a Philly cheesesteak. When the New England Patriots took the lead, and I figure that's why they lost. Is because I got greedy.
Yeah, that's it. No, that's fair.
Yeah,
actually, I do like on one of the YouTube channels I follow is Food Wishes, which is great. Chef John is fantastic. But he did a Philly cheesesteak dip. Kind of interested in that. I didn't want to make it, obviously, because I was cheering against the Eagles. So I knew. You obviously didn't. You didn't figure this out until too late. But maybe soon, when I finally get over this Philadelphia Eagles hate, 3-4 years maybe.
It took a long time for the Saints thing to happen. Like, it took an exorcism. That's what you could call the Minneapolis Miracle. That was an exorcism at US Bank Stadium.
Yeah, and I'll always cheer against the Saints a little bit, but yeah, that definitely like exorcism. So I can have New Orleans food, which is great because it's amazing.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, I think if once I finally emotionally mature as a human being, I can have the Philly cheesesteak dip.
Emotionally mature as a human being.
Yeah, be an adult.
That is more overrated than I can possibly describe. I adult better than most people I know, and adulting sucks.
Most of my bills are on auto pay now. I'm super proud of myself.
That is a good level of adult. I was describing the joy the other day to my brother of having my parents watch my son overnight so I can get a night's sleep, so I can get like a regular night's sleep. I was like trying to describe. It was impossible to describe. But like, listen, this is a level of adult you haven't reached yet because you don't have a child. But listen, this is worth its weight in gold. Gold, I say. Final question is from Andrew Frazier, who asks, Burrito Bowl, are they ever okay to consume?
If you've got a dietary restriction, yeah. If you're like, tortillas have too much carbs for me or something. I can't get behind it for me. It's a burrito salad. If you call it that, I'm a little bit better.
Well, what if you use the contents of the burrito bowl and combine that with chips?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'm on board.
That is what I do at Qdoba. I'll get the burrito bowl, steak, queso, a couple different types of the salsa, and then the fajita vegetables with that, and then make sure I get an order of the chips because they are both deliciously salty and have a little bit of lime on them too.
Yeah, the Qdoba chips underrated.
Yes, and I will just mow down on that with the chips. And like I might have to chop up the vegetables a little bit, the fajita vegetables, but otherwise that ends up being like a meal and a half.
Yeah, and honestly, it's not like one of those things where, say water and cereal where I'll judge you. It's just not for
me. Yeah, because anybody who does that is an idiot.
A monster, really.
Yeah, against God in polite society.
Right.
The state of it, mate. All right, so that is going to be it for this edition of Norse Code. We will be coming back, maybe not next week, but we will be coming back soon with some more content for you. As soon as more Vikings news comes up, we will also be talking about the combine as it comes up. We'll also be talking more about the draft and our draft needs. And if something crazy happens in the way of our new offensive coordinator telling us that Teddy Bridgewater stinks on ice, we will be right there to break it down for you. Arif, do you have anything to plug for us before we are finished for the day?
No, I'm going to write a John dee-fah-LIP-oh piece, so I hope that's hopefully Monday, but at this point I don't have faith that I'll have it published by Monday.
There is a lack of faith, but look out for it this week if nothing else. We still need to get you the domain name of carsonwentzsucks.com or something like that, and that's where everyone can find all of your articles.
Should be pretty cheap at this point.
Yes. So that is it for this edition of the show. Thank you guys so much for listening. Again, if you'd like to donate to the show, you can do so at paypal.me/NorseCode or patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. Again, thanks so much. For Arif, for myself, my name is James. Thank you so much for listening, and demand excellence. Demand Norse Code. We'll see you soon.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, or wherever else fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, who can be found on Twitter at ArifHassanNFL. Our intrepid producer and occasional co-host James Pagachnik can be found on Twitter at Big Mono or curating the official Norse Code Twitter feed at Norse Code DN. I'm your host with a firm grasp of the obvious, Dusty O'Connell, and my name is my handle on Twitter. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, your one-time donation can be made at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Please visit our website, NorseCodePodcast.com, where you'll find links to our Facebook and YouTube pages, along with the episode archive and some other good stuff. And any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be emailed to NorseCodePodcast@gmail.com. And on behalf of the entire Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.